So I'm beginning now to record.
Yes, thank you.
And then here's the schedule of equilibrium in the money market, where money demand equals money supply. Okay, so now we have an increase in money supply. What happens now?
LM is responsible for money supply, yes?
Yes, good. Money
LM,
supply and money demand. Yes, that's right. Good.
LM shifts to the right.
Good. Uh-huh. Why? But you move.
Increases.
But let's see. Money supply increases along the old Ellen schedule. On that schedule, money supply had equal money demand. So now we have excess money supply. To restore equilibrium, we need to increase money demand. But the amount of money that we want to hold depends in this model only on the interest rate and real income or output. The interest rate is fixed by global monetary markets. So that cannot change in the analysis. The income must rise. In order to raise money demand. Now we have new equilibrium in the money market on the new Ellen schedule. On the old schedule, we don't have equilibrium, we have excess money. So that schedule no longer describes what will be happening in the money market. Okay, good. So what happens now to the exchange rate and the output in this case?
It increases.
The exchange rate increases. And what about output? Or real income?
As well?
Output rises as well. Good. Why? But why does output rise? But let's see. Output in general is equal to consumption plus investment, government spending on goods and services, and net exports. Now the tenge depreciates since a dollar can buy more tenge than it had before. So our goods become cheaper for Americans in the foreign dollars to buy. So what happens to exports? That is exports
Ex-
from Kazakhstan.
Export decreases.
Why?
No, as goods become cheaper,
Good.
export increases.
Good. Good.
So export becomes more than import, and output increases.
Yes, that's right. And what about imports into Kazakhstan? Do
Mm.
they rise and fall?
As tenge depreciates, imports decreases.
Decreases? Is that what you said? But
Oh,
um, I did not quite hear you. Did you say that imports rise or fall into
uh,
Kazakhstan?
oh,
Good. And why?
um, because tenge becomes cheaper.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Under
not
dollars.
efficient.
Yes, good.
That's right.
Yes, good. So the tenge costs less of $1 than before. Good. So goods with dollar prices become more expensive for us since we have tenge. And therefore output imports fall. So as you say, net exports or the difference between exports and imports will rise. And thus GDP or output will rise as well. Okay, good. So you have a good understanding, I think, of the Mundell model. So let's now take a look at fiscal policy in the same model. Again, with the exchange rate of tenge per dollar. The same schedule in the real sector and the same schedule in the money sector, the non-real sector. And now we have the increase in spending for the government. What happens now? Go
If
ahead.
G
Say again.
uh, if G rises,
Spending,
IS
spending rises, yes, good.
model shifts to the right.
Good. And why?
Because
You're right,
like
but why are you right?
output equals consumption plus as mm,
Just good that you're correct that output the rise, the what does that connote? Then shift in the right of the IS curve. Well, let's see. Um, Given the exchange rate, as you say, GDP is going to rise. And that is the case for any exchange rate at all. So we have to have a shift to the right in the RS curve because we have more output for any exchange rate than we had before. Okay, and what happens now?
Engagement rate decreases.
Yes, good. So what does that mean for the tenge? Is the tenge becoming stronger or weaker?
Tenge depreciates.
Did you say depreciates or appreciates?
Depreciates, yes. Yeah. Appreciates?
Yes, in terms of the dollar.
So it becomes stronger.
Exactly. It's worth more of a dollar than before. Worth more than my sterling anyway. So, for example, the exchange rate had been, let's say, 400 tenge per dollar. So each tenge is worth 1/400th of a dollar. Now, the exchange rate is 200 tenge per dollar. That is, the exchange rate has decreased. But this does not mean that the value of the penny decreases given the way we have defined the exchange rate. Now, each penny is worth how much of a dollar? One 200th of a dollar. So it doesn't sound like very much, but in fact, each penny is worth twice as much as before. So the penny is more expensive in dollar terms. Therefore, exports from Kazakhstan will rise or fall.
Now, if tenge appreciates,
Good.
it becomes stronger. Then export decreases
Good.
and imports increases.
Good. So what happens to GDP in
It
Kazakhstan?
falls
Yes, since
because import becomes imports more than exports.
well, imports rise and exports fall. We don't necessarily know that imports are greater than exports. That
Yes,
could
imports
happen.
exports.
All that we know is that net exports are falling. Good. So why is there no change in output? In this scenario?
Because of it affects to government spending or investment?
That's a good point. We assume that consumption depends on output, that investment does not. Investment depends only on the interest rate. Since the interest rate is fixed in this model, there is no change in investment. But yes, government spending rises and net exports fall until we have in the new equilibrium no change in output. That's the fascinating part of the story. Despite the stimulus to the economy through government spending, there is in fact no change in GDP in the new equilibrium. We just go from point A to point B, and that's it. All that changes is the exchange rate. So fiscal policy does not work very well in this example. Okay, so are you comfortable with the Mundell model? It sounds like you're following the analysis pretty well.
Excuse me?
Are you comfortable with the Mundell model? That's the
Yes.
highest LM analysis
Yes.
in the opening comment. Okay, good. So let's take a look now at question number 2. So we have a library with 52 books. And we have a barter system that is there's a different price for between every two titles in the library. So let's see how we can count up all the possible relative prices and get an idea of what may be wrong with barter rather than a book market per se. Okay, so as you already know, that we had in books, we will have the sum of the sequence of up to n minus 1 books. So, for example, we have two titles, then we have just one relative price for those two books. Uh, for example, two books of the second title in exchange for one book of the first title. It is a relative price because the price of the first book is measured in terms of the number of books that we can buy of the second title in exchange. Okay, so if we add a third title, we now have a new relative price between the third title and the first, and also a new relative price of the third title for the second book. We add two more relative prices to the barter system. And in general, if we add a title number n minus 1, or make it easier, if we add the nth title then we add n minus 1 relative prices. So that's the idea. The more titles we have, the much greater the increase in relative prices. In this case, we have 52 titles in all. So we have 1 plus 2 plus up to 51 relative prices. So that's fine. The only problem now is to find an easy way to calculate the sum of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 51. But let's see. We know that the sum up to n equals n plus 1 times n over 2. Then n is even. So, for example, if we write out the sequence this way, take the two extreme numbers in the sequence 1 and n. So the value of that pair is just 1 plus n. So the second pair has the extremes n minus 1 plus 2. And what does that equal? Once again, n plus 1. So every time that you take another pair of numbers from the extremes, the value of the sum of that pair is always n plus 1. Here's one more example. There are extremes now of 3 and n minus 2. The value of the third pair is once again n plus 1. And that's true for all the pairs in the sequence adding up numbers from 1 to n. So the sequence from 1 to 2 plus all the way up to n is equal to n plus 1 times the number of pairs. And how many pairs do we have? In the sequence of 1 to n, but we have n numbers, and we pair off all the n numbers. So the number of pairs is just n divided by 2. So for example, if this is a sequence, we have 6 numbers. And so we have 6 divided by 2 equals 3 pairs in this case. 1 plus 6, 2 plus 5, 3 plus 4. So there is a formula. The value of the sequence of numbers from 1 to n is n plus 1 times n over 2. If if n is even. So what happens if n is odd, an odd number? Notice that now n divided by 2 is not an integer. So, for example, if this is a sequence, 1 plus 2 plus 3, n over 2 is equal to 1.5. But that cannot express the number of pairs. That number must be an integer. So what do we do? How can we find the sum of numbers from 1 to n if n is odd? And unfortunately, this is the case that we have now, because we want the summation for the book titles up to n minus 1. But that number is 51. Remember that n is the total number of titles of 52. And then we add n minus 1 to a number of relative prices. What's this value?
The formula will be n plus 1
Uh-huh.
multiplied by
Sounds good. Yes, I agree that in this summation, we can again pair off the numbers. And each pair has the value of n plus 1. But n divided by 2, the number of pairs doesn't make any sense. It's not an integer. So that's our problem. We've got to find a way of expressing the number of pairs that will give us an integer. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So what do we do? Well, let's see. In this case, we have a final number of 51. In our sequence.
maybe n divided by 3? No.
Well, let's see. So if we have 51 divided by 3, then that will give us a 17.
20.
I believe 17 is enough. 3 into 51, 17. However, although we now have an integer, we don't have the number of pairs. By definition, the number of pairs in a sequence of 1 plus 2 plus all the way up to n must be n over 2. There's no way around that. But you have the right idea in mind. You're looking for a way of expressing the pairs as an integer. Well, suppose we try this. What if we change the final number in this case for the sequence from 51 to 50? So there is a sequence right there.
Maybe formula is n plus 1 multiplied by n divided by 2 and then plus n.
Yes, good. Yeah, that's exactly correct. So all that we need to do is to ensure that in the sequence, the last number is even. And then we can add the succeeding number, which is odd. Good. Very good. So now we can apply our usual formula, n plus 1 times n over 2, which in this case, for this sequence right here, is equal to 51 times 50 over 2 or 51 times
Multiplied by 25.
25. And now, for the sequence of 1 plus 2 plus all the way up now up to 51, the value is the value of the first 50 numbers, which we already know is 51.
Yes, so
25
51 multiplied by 25 and plus 51.
plus 51. Good. And then notice that this is equal to 51 times 25 plus 1, or 26. So the number in this case is now easy to compute as long as we remember to break it up into the sequence that ends in an even number and then add the odd number. Yes, very good. So for extra credit, I will let you show that the formula of n plus 1 times n over 2 works even when n is an odd number. Good for 3 functions of extra credit on Tuesday. Okay, well, that was fun. And it also, I think, suggests that barter is very inefficient because it involves a humongous number of relative prices. In this case, 51 times 26.
So I should so I should prove it by Tuesday.
For extra credit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But how this formula can work for odd number? Okay, I understand. Okay, got it.
Yes, yeah. Good. I think you'll have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other problems here, I think, are maybe a bit easier. Question 3 is a problem about present value of 100 tenge to be received 1 year from now. So the only thing to bear in mind is what exactly is present value. So in general, what is the idea behind present value? So this is the value today of a sum to be received in the future. So you have a savings account, you put some amount of money into that account that will give you 100 tenge 1 year from today when the interest rate is 10%. So don't know what the number is, let's say PD. Put PD in the bank today, and then next year you will receive the principal plus 10% interest. Then all of that will add up to $1. So notice that one in this case is the principal and point one the represents the interest payment to you. So present value softening is just $1 divided by 1 plus the interest rate of 1.1, about 91 tenge. Sorry, I'm so accustomed to working with dollars as an American, I sometimes forget to convert to tenge. So is that all right? 91 tenge is the present value of 100 tenge to be received next year at an interest rate of 10% because they can earn a total of 120 next year. They are therefore indifferent between having either 91 today or 120 next year. Since they can always put the 91 in the bank and earn 100. Okay, so here's the next question. What is the present value of 100 to be received 2 years, not 1 year, but 2 years from today? How can we express that present value? Again, with an interest rate of 10%. Well, whatever that amount is, let's just call it PV. And then after 1 year, we will have principal and interest that amounts to 1.1 times the initial present value. Here we have, go ahead, say again.
I'm going to go to the elevator, and you remember my internet connection is very bad there.
Okay.
So if we continue after 2 minutes.
Okay, fine. So after 1 year, we had in the bank the original deposit of TV, and then principal plus interest of 1.1 PV, given the interest rate of 10%. But this time, we want the present value of the amount 100 tenge to be received not after 1 year, but after 2 years. So rather than withdraw of the total amount in the bank after 1 year, you leave it in the bank for another year. And at the end of that year, the second year, we will have 100 tenge. So in other words, TD plus 1.1 is the principal in our account in the second year. So at the end of the second year, our total amount in the account after year 2 is the principal. Times the interest payment in the second year, which again involves an interest rate of 10%. And we already know that that amount is 120. So how can we find the present value this time? Just solve the PD. Equal to 120 divided by this time 1.1 squared. That's the amount right there. And in this case, CD is equal to about 84 kg. We put 84 kg in the savings account today. After 1 year, we have about 91 kg. And then after another year, we have 100 kg. So we add about 9 kg of interest in the second year. So in general, the present value of the sum of this quadrant S to be received after n years at an interest rate of I is expressed as the sum of divided by 1 plus the interest rate to the power n. In our example, the sum is 100 kg to be received after 2 years at an interest rate of I, or 100 divided by 1.1 squared. That's when we got the amount. But the intuition, I hope, is clear that we just take the amount that we have accumulated in the bank after 1 year, and then rather than withdraw it, we will leave it in the bank to earn interest as well as maintain the principal. That's the idea. So here's an extra present problem for you. What is the present value of 100 kg to be received after 3 years at an interest rate of 10%? You can express that as a formula rather than actually calculate it. So what do we have now?
PV equals 100
Good.
divided by 1.1.
Good.
And in the third, like, I don't remember, not square, but in the third. Yes.
Did you say to the power of 3? Yes, that's right. Good.
The power of 3, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't have a way of expressing the power rather than use the deterrent. Okay.
So it equals 75.1.
About 75 change. Oh, so that makes good sense. Since 10% of 75 change is 7.5. So we have 82.5 in the bank after 1 year. That's about right. Maybe a little bit high. But that's good for 5 points. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I think that the other questions you can manage on your own. I think we talked about adverse selection already. Briefly, this is the idea that the borrower knows more about the prospects that he will be paid a loan than you, the lender, do. So if you deal directly with a borrower who has a bad risk like me, I may not pay you back. But I know myself that I will not pay you back. You are not sure as a lender who might take a chance. But you would rather go to the bank and let the bank decide whether to loan out your money to me because the bank already has my financial history. The bank already realizes that I'm a bad risk and therefore will charge me a higher interest rate. You would rather go to the bank, put money in your checking account that the bank then can turn around and lend to me at a higher interest rate that compensates for the bad risks. So that's a basic idea.
Okay.